Hi guys, so it's been the first 100 days of Donald Trump's second term as president of the United States, and the key talking point for us obviously in the automotive industry has been the tariffs. So what I thought I would do in this video is actually look at exactly how manufacturers are responding to those tariffs. So just to remind you, there is a 25% tariff on all imported cars. And then, of course, overnight, this triggered shipment pauses, factory slowdowns, cost-cutting carnage, and some people were saying it put up to 25,000 British jobs at risk if the car industry here in the UK goes kaput, really. Now, at the moment we've got Aston Martin sitting in bonded warehouses. We've got Jaguar Land Rover has halted US exports. Volvo slashed billions. Even Porsche is showing signs of some panic. And of course, the thing is that this is a constantly moving story. It's constantly changing. Every day they change the terms of these tariffs or whatever. And he's just further adding to this disruption and chaos by constantly changing his mind. To be honest, it's become, I've done several videos on this, you've probably seen on my channel about the tariffs, and every time it's because something has changed, and it's actually quite hard to keep up with what's going on. But of course the latest change, which was literally as I'm recording this, I think it was the day before yesterday, so that would have been, I think, 29th of April 2025. He's again put in some delays for some of these tariffs for parts on local car companies. Frankly, it's just adding to all of the confusion. In any case, whatever concessions that he's making, the question is, are they too little? Are they too late? Who are they going to help? Who are they not going to help? So in this video, what I'm going to do, stay with me, it's going to be a long video, I'll warn you that right now. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or whatever, because you're going to stay with me for a while. I'm going to break it all down brand by brand. So I'm going to look at everything, every major manufacturer that is impacted by this, from Jaguar to Toyota, Ferrari to Ford, all of them. And I'm going to look at why this tariff is affecting them, how it's affecting them, what they're going to do about it. I won't be covering Chinese cars in this video because I think actually, as I've said in previous videos, I don't think they're affected by the tariffs. A, because USA wasn't currently a primary market for them. They're too busy dominating the rest of the world. And B, because ultimately I think they're probably going to benefit from all of this. But anyway, that's a different topic for another video that's already been discussed and will probably be discussed again. In this one, we're going to be looking at what's going on right now with all of the car companies. How are they reacting? What are they doing? And we'll get into all of that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
So again, let's just start with what has happened. I've covered, like I said, this in more detail in previous videos, but it's a 25% import tariff on all foreign built cars and auto parts, so parts as well. And the idea is supposedly to boost the US manufacturing, to punish overseas rival, especially Chinese car companies, which, like I said, hadn't really got around to sending much of their product there yet anyway. Like I said, they're too busy dominating the rest of the world, especially when it comes to EVs. But what has been the result of all of this? Of course, chaos. Car makers are halting shipments, raising prices, cutting jobs, rethinking entire production strategies. And of course, like I said, he keeps changing his mind. So this week, as I mentioned, in the White House, they have given some partial relief. So there are tariff credits for companies that build cars in the US. There are exemptions for parts from friendly countries, and there are going to be refunds for steel and aluminium imports used in production. This is an attempt to soften the blow, but a lot of the damage has already been done. So let's look at some of the major manufacturers, and we'll start with right here in the UK. We'll start with Jaguar Land Rover, which is pretty much stuck and staggering at the moment. After all, 25% of their global sales are in America, and that's on hold at the moment. So Jaguar, JLR, then Jaguar Land Rover, I should say. So primarily, we know that Jaguar is on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment. But of course, you've got Range Rover, we've got Land Rover Defender. They have paused all US shipments. The USA is an important market for JLR luxury brands. We are enacting our planned short-term actions, including a shipment pause in April. So this was the month just gone, as we develop our mid to longer term plans, they explained. Don't forget that JLR does not have a US factory or assembly plant over there, so there's no quick fix for them. JLR had considered building an American factory in the past, but instead they invested in Slovakia because setting up a plant in America is expensive. It's estimated to cost over $1 billion to do something like that, and of course it takes a while. And as they point out, well, there's no guarantee that we invest that money, take all that time, and then the tariffs completely change again. In the meantime, JLR is reviewing pricing for upcoming models and developing mid to longer term plans to cope with potentially prolonged periods of these trade barriers. Now, overall, the impact on the British industry, JLR's move is part of a broader hit to the UK auto industry. Britain produced about 905,000 cars last year, with roughly 1 in 6 of those exported to the US. So the tariff poses a serious threat to the UK car industry, what remains of it. Analysts note that British luxury marques have, they've got little choice but to raise the US prices if the tariffs persist, since none of them actually have production in America. As S&P Global Mobility Analysis Tim Urquhart put it, they can't absorb all the cost of a 25% tariff, so that will have to be passed on to customers. It's going to be quite a bit of that. And talking of which, let's move on to Aston Martin. Again, slightly on ice. They have parked cars at ports and frozen exports to US. As of what I've found out. So again, this is all based on research that I found. Things are constantly changing, things are constantly moving, so things might have changed already by the time you see this, but this is based on what I've found so far, all of this. Executives are awaiting, this is Aston Martin again, executives are awaiting clearer trade resolutions or possible exemptions before sending more cars across the Atlantic. The luxury automaker is holding inventory at ports to delay tariff payments and is monitoring trade negotiations before resuming shipments, notes one industry briefing. They are facing, and I've covered this in a previous video, a potential £30 million loss, which for a company like that is quite significant. Though Aston Martin has not publicly detailed its pricing strategy, industry observers expect significant price hikes on its luxury models if the tariff remain. Those buying a hand-built, and they are hand-built, don't forget, Aston Martins or similar high-end European imports in America could expect hefty price rises, according to these analysts, because makers like Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, Ferrari they will have to pass on much of the 25% cost or additional cost, or the hike in cost to their customers. And this strategy mirrors other niche British brands, which of course could include things like Lotus cars, which has also, in fact, from what I found, is indefinitely halted US deliveries of its sports cars pending clarity. So they're just waiting to see what will happen. But of course, it's a big deal for companies like Lotus, which of course are on a massive drive now to up their scale with the EVs and EV products in the pipeline. Let's move to Germany, actually, with Volkswagen and Audi. So Volkswagen Group, really, because Audi is owned by Volkswagen. Again, they are holding at carports. Audi was among the first to alert dealers that shipments were being put on hold. In a memo to US Audi dealerships, the company said all vehicles en route to America after April the 2nd would be held at port rather than delivered to showrooms. Cars that landed before the tariff deadline were processed normally and even labeled with stickers indicating no tariff charges to differentiate them. So those cars that made it before April the 2nd, they had a label on them. That's extraordinary. Volkswagen has reportedly taken similar action, pausing exports from factories, including their shipments from Mexico to US ports. The Mexico thing might be changing. An Audi spokesperson, I should say, said that the company is closely monitoring developments and will comprehensively assess internally the potential impact on supply chains and our production network. Audi's popular Q5 crossover, built in Mexico, could face a double tariff hit if it isn't eligible for the USMCA, which is the cooperation between the three countries. If it doesn't benefit from those trade benefits, effectively there could be as much as 50% total duties on that. I'm not quite sure how that works out, but this is what I saw in one of the reports. Audi will need to decide whether to swallow that cost, shift more production to its European plants, which ironically, if they do that and then ship them, they'll be only subject to 25% tariff. It's kind of weird what's going on. Or they could just raise the price. So they're thinking about what to do. Future production shifts. Executives at Volkswagen have hinted that if the tariffs drag on, they might shift more production to the US or other tariff-exempt locations. Volkswagen already builds some of its SUVs like the Atlas over there. However, many models like the Volkswagen Tiguan and the saloon cars are Europe or possibly built in Mexico, or are built in Mexico, I should say. And according to industry reports, Volkswagen is even considering expanding the US factory capacity to mitigate costs, effectively to build more cars there. For now, though, these are contingency plans, and no new investments have actually been confirmed as of yet. Running a business these days, especially if you're a one-man army, is exhausting. Believe me, I can tell you about this from personal experience. From client follow-ups to content to payments, it can be chaos. That's why I want to tell you about my friends at Strategency. They help solopreneurs and small business owners, especially folks in the car scene, automate, scale, and actually grow their business online. Websites, content strategy, Instagram to WhatsApp, all sorted. If you're ready to go from being overwhelmed to in control, book a free 15-minute consult at the link in the description now. Oh, and tell them Brown Car Guy sent you. Another brand that's actually owned by the Volkswagen Group is, of course, Porsche. But Porsche kind of operates as an independent thing. Porsche were clever because they flooded the US markets with cars before the tariffs. They rushed inventory before, anticipating that April 2nd, April 3rd tariff start. And they shipped additional inventory to the US in late March to get ahead of these duties. And the maneuver stock dealers with extra Porsches that arrived before the tariff deadline, allowing their sales to continue in April without much change to the pricing or anything like that. Porsche confirmed through March that it kept US prices constant and deliveries were flowing. However, once those pre-tariff cars are sold, the situation becomes tougher. The other thing I should say about Porsche is that, of course, a lot of customers like to personalize their Porsches. They like specific specs, specific trim materials. So I'm guessing there was probably an inability to do that if they sent stock cars over there which were pre-built, or maybe they got early orders, and I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that there was probably less choice of customization unless some of that can be done locally at the dealer or whatever. Again, sticking with Porsche, no US production. So they have high exposure. They have no assembly in the States. And of course, that makes them highly exposed to these levies. The company's margins have already taken a hit. So even despite the fact that they were clever and they sent all these cars early, in Q1 2025, Porsche's operating profit margin fell to 8.6% from 14.2% a year prior. And executives cited the US tariffs as a key factor that pressured these profits. According to Porsche's finance chief, the new tariffs will cost the company at least 100 million euros in April and May alone. 100 million euros. Porsche's share price has therefore understandably slumped 25% year to date as the investors grapple with this tariff fallout. If these 25% duties remain in effect beyond the short term, Porsche plans to pass those costs on to buyers. We have not raised prices, but we will do so if duties remain in place, Porsche's CFO has apparently stated. Porsche doesn't have any US factories, and unlike some rivals, will not consider US manufacturing solutions because, as their bosses say, they've dismissed this idea of doing that simply because the volumes in America are low, relatively speaking. They sell about 70,000 units a year. It's just not worth their while to create a dedicated manufacturing facility over there. And of course, if you buy a Porsche, you want a German-built Porsche, don't you? Even sharing a facility with other Volkswagen brands, because Volkswagen has a factory there, isn't seen as viable. Yeah, you don't want your Porsche built in a VW factory, do you? So this means that Porsche will remain an importer and therefore subject to tariffs. The company has accordingly slashed its 2025 profit outlook. Target margin has been cut to 7%, down from 10 to 12%, which they were forecasting before the tariffs came in effect. I'll come back to BMW Mercedes in a minute. Let's go to Volvo. And Volvo, of course, is owned by Geely in China, Geely, whatever you want to call them. And they have, of course, a heavy reliance on these exports. So it's one of the most exposed car makers in the US because of these tariffs. It does have a plant in South Carolina, but that currently produces only one model, which is the S60 Saloon. Most Volvos sold in the US are imported from Europe and China, including the popular XC90 and the XC60 SUVs. The XC60 is built in Sweden, and it's recharge EVs. These might be built in Belgium or in China. And their boss stated that it is not sustainable to sell European-made Volvos in the US with effectively a 27.5. He's adding on the 2.5 that was there previously already. And importing from China is impossible, is the quoted is in terms quoted is impossible under the current conditions, since the US tariffs are a staggering 125 to 145%. US production plans. Well, Volvo's solution is to move more production to the United States as quickly as feasible. So they are actually taking that action. We will have to increase the number of cars we build in the US and surely move another model to that factory. So I'm guessing maybe XC90, they're going to think about building that in America. The company is working to expand its South Carolina plant to add more new models. And like I said, probably the next generation XC90. However, scaling up this process itself could take 1 to 2 years. So it's not a quick process, as I've mentioned in other videos. I keep iterating this. It's not as simple as dropping a new factory in. In the short term, the next 10 to 12 to 24 months, Volvo will have to sell the cars we have that are already built abroad, even if it means lower profit margins and higher prices. So I guess from that you can ascertain that they're talking about absorbing some of that 25%, but also passing some of it on to the customers. Cost cuts and forecast withdrawal. Facing these challenges, Volvo has launched an aggressive efficiency drive. On April 29th, Volvo announced $1.9 billion in cost cuts. $1.9 billion in cost cuts. That's impressive. And a restructuring of its US operations. The company even withdrew its financial guidance for 2025 and 2026 due to this uncertainty, a rare move that sent its stock down 10%. Volvo said the trade measures, the tariffs, hit its Q1 profits, which plunged 60% year on year. The new cost and cash action plan will involve layoffs, mainly white-collar staff, and deeper investment cuts that were previously planned. We need to slim down the organization, work smarter, and that, of course, will lead to a reduction of personnel. If you remember, this is worrying because don't forget we lost Saab, the other big Swedish car manufacturer, and Volvo was only saved because China bought it. So we don't want a brand such as Volvo disappearing anytime soon. So BMW and Mercedes, how are they getting off? Well, they're kind of shrugging it off for now because they're in a slightly lucky position in the sense that they do actually already build a ton of their SUVs in the US. BMW's a large plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which produces popular SUVs like the X5 and X7, gives it a buffer. Vehicles built in the USA aren't subject to the import tariff, of course, so they're fine. And 60% of BMWs sold in America are actually made there. They're mostly the SUVs. So this has spared BMW the kind of immediate disruption that has been faced by other manufacturers. BMW, however, does import many of its models also, including the saloons like the 5 Series and even SUVs like the X1. And some electric models. Don't forget, BMW is doing really well with their electric cars, so that's a big impact for them. For the imports, BMW has signaled that it will not immediately raise prices. According to Wall Street Journal report, BMW said it would absorb the extra tariff costs on its Mexico-produced cars at least through April. In practice, this means that BMW dealerships can continue selling models like the 3 Series built in San Luis Potosi, Mexico, at current prices for the time being, with BMW taking a margin hit rather than passing a 25% tax on to consumers in hopes that the tariff might be temporary. Likewise, Mercedes also builds a significant share of its vehicles for America in Alabama, chiefly the SUV range. So that's the GLE, GLS, EQS, SUV, I guess, etc., etc. These Alabama-made models remain, of course, unaffected by the import tariff, allowing Mercedes to keep their prices steady. However, Mercedes still imports many vehicles, just as BMW does, the saloons like the C-Class, E-Class, etc., some of the sports models and some of the other SUVs as well. So all of those do now carry a 25% duty when they come in. The company is believed to be taking a wait-and-see strategy similar to BMW. Dealers have not reported widespread shortages yet, suggesting Mercedes is still shipping cars, potentially relying on pre-tariff stock or accepting possibly a cut in their profit margins for now. The brand has strong global profits, so they could probably absorb the pain, at least for the time being, until they figure out what's going on. Let's move on to some exotica and luxury cars. So Ferrari, Bentley, Rolls-Royce. I mean, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to pass on the pain to their customers. Inevitably, I guess they have no choice, because they're in a position where most of their customers are in the elite realm. And I guess the logic there is that, well, they can probably afford a little bit extra. So Ferrari has already added up to 10% on its US prices, according to reports. Ferrari exempted a few, but it's kind of selected what Ferrari is doing. They exempted a few of their new models from the surcharge. So the company stated it will cover the tariff costs for itself for certain models, such as the Roma Coupe and hybrid models like the 296 GTB and SF90 Stradale. These cars, some of which are newer releases, will keep their pre-tariff prices, at least for now, to avoid stifling the market launch momentum. So this suggests Ferrari is taking a slightly, let's see with this, suck it up and see sort of approach to see what will work and what won't work. So they're protecting demand for the newer, more, if they, in their mind, the strategic models, but while on the other hand, upping costs on the other ones. So for example, the V8 powered F8 Tributo and the V12, 812, no, what is it now? The 12 cylindry, I guess that one. So these are actually, I think the prices are going to increase on those ones. Rolls-Royce and Bentley are in a similar position. Both of these British brands, which are actually owned by BMW and Volkswagen Group respectively, hand build their cars, of course, with pretty big price tags already, and their US volumes are quite small anyway. So analysts expect these companies to follow suit with stealthy price rises. High-end buyers of Rolls-Royce and Bentley should expect to take the biggest hit from the tariffs. Urquhart of S&P Global noted, because such brands have the greatest pricing power to pass costs on to customers. Indeed, a Rolls-Royce Ghost or Bentley Flying Spur could easily add an extra $40,000 to its price without actually derailing much of its demand, because of the ultra-rich nature of the people that buy and own those cars. In short, the tariff will make the status symbols just more expensive. Bad news possibly for those aspiring to own one, but a minor inconvenience for the sort of clientele that they already have. Right, so let's move on to actually American brands. And this is quite interesting. Ford is calm, cautious. They're trying to be clever about the whole thing. Most of their cars, of course, are US built, so there's less of a direct impact on them. The majority of its lineup, like the F-Series trucks and SUVs, are being sold tariff-free. Now, things like the Mustang Mach-E, electric SUV, and the Bronco Sport are made in Mexico. The Transit Connect van is from Spain, so those will have the tariff on them. But, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on behind the scenes, which of course resulted in alleviating some of those tariffs, which I was talking about earlier, that happened a couple of days ago. Behind the scenes, Ford was active, along with GM and others, in lobbying US government for tariff relief. CEO Jim Farley and his peers appealed to the administration that the tariffs would harm the entire auto ecosystem in America, consumers, suppliers, manufacturers. Their efforts did, like I said, bear fruit. When Trump announced plans to soften the tariff impacts. Farley, that CEO of Ford, publicly praised the move, saying that the changes will help mitigate the impacts of tariffs on car makers, suppliers, and consumers. Ford did not have to halt any production in line because of this tariff, a key difference from some of its competitors, thanks to the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA. And Ford's manufacturing footprint, many of its cross-border products might qualify for this duty-free treatment, depending on the interpretation of the rules, I guess. Early on, the confusion did reign over which vehicles were exempt or were included, and Ford did prepare contingency plans in case they were fully tariffed. For instance, Ford might have faced tough decisions on what to do about the Mexico-built Maverick pickup and the Bronco Sport, which is actually, especially the Bronco, is actually a popular hot-selling car. And options for them could have been to raise their prices by about 10 to 15% or reduce some of the features in the cars actually to cut costs. But of course, I think that they're going to stay their hand on that now because of these new changes. The same goes for GM. Like Ford, most of GM sales are actually domestically made products. So most of their pickups and trucks are built in the US. GM does import some of the models like the Buick SUV from China. Buicks from China, I think, Chevrolet and GMC trucks from Canada, and some smaller cars from Mexico, but it had already been localizing production in recent years. For example, when a 25% tariff on Chinese goods hit, GM slashed imports of the Chinese-made Buick Envision. Plus, the new tariffs immediate bite on GM was softer than on European and other car makers. But GM was exposed to higher parts cost and the general turmoil in the market, of course. They have pulled guidance due to uncertainty. This is again another move on the financial front of the company. GM withdrew its full year earnings forecast for 2025 because of the tariff uncertainty. This is again, as I mentioned previously with the other company that did the same, is an unusual step and underscores how unpredictable the situation is. GM had reported strong first quarter sales in profit, but management literally told investors they could not confidently predict the rest of the year with tariffs in flux. GM CEO Mary Berry, that she's the chef, isn't she? No, Mary Barra was at the forefront of those behind the scenes lobbying that was going on to get Trump to change or to soften the blow of the tariffs. Similarly, Stellantis. So Stellantis, of course, is the big company that owns in Europe Alfa Romeo, Citroën, Peugeot, Vauxhall, Opel, etc., etc., but of course also owns what was formerly the Chrysler Group, so Dodge, Jeep, Ram, etc., etc. They did have temporary plant idling. Stellantis was quick to pause production at 2 assembly plants outside of the US. In early April, one in Mexico and one in Canada. This was as a direct response to these US import tariffs. Stellantis didn't officially name which plants, but they were most likely Jeep Compass factory in Toluca, Mexico, and the Chrysler minivan plant in Windsor, Canada. By idling these facilities, Stellantis avoided building up inventory that would be hit by tariffs at the border. However, the impact cascaded to its American operations, and the company temporarily laid off about 900 workers at U.S. parts plants that supply those assembly lines. So there you go. Parts go from America overseas, the cars get built and they get imported. You see how this thing works, and it's not such an easy thing to put tariffs in place. For example, engines made in Michigan for the Jeep Compass weren't needed during the Mexico stoppage, leading to furlough. Whoa. Production reshuffling. In addition to halting some North American output, Stellantis is undoubtedly reshuffling its production plans globally. The company produces many vehicles in Europe that are exported back to the US, and some Jeep products, I'm guessing. And these plans were under review. Stellantis said its commitment to strengthen the competitive American auto industry in cooperation with the government suggests it will consider building more vehicles in the US if tariffs persist. In fact, Stellantis had already announced in 2024 that it would start building the electric Fiat 500e in North America for the US market. And this plan has now been accelerated because of this situation. Like other companies, Stellantis will try to leverage the USMCA exemptions for parts and vehicles. So hopefully that'll calm things down for them. And it seems that this has allowed Stellantis to restart production at Windsor and Toluca. Hey, before I carry on, make sure that you have hit like and don't forget to share and subscribe. By the way, help out my channel by supporting me on Patreon and Ko-fi, or by taking out a subscription right here on YouTube. Or better still, buy my books. I've got 3 of them out now. There's 2 of them. Those are fiction. One is a novel. It's the novel that every petrolhead should read. It's called The Ulysses Files. It's about the war on motorists. And the other one is a collection of my short stories from over 2 decades. Everything from science fiction to cars to the state of humanity. And then this is my latest book. This is basically me putting my 35 years of experience and knowledge doing what I do into a book to help other people get into this game. So if you've ever thought about being a content creator, a journalist, or an influencer to do with cars, you need to get this book. It's out now on Amazon. Let's look at the Japanese now. Right, so Toyota. Toyota is massive, let's be honest, in America. No price hikes yet. Toyota spokesperson had stated, this was back at the end of March, that the company will maintain our current operations for the time being and focus on reducing costs internally rather than making customers pay more. Toyota, one of the biggest car companies in the world, quite profitable. I guess they're thinking, well, we'll absorb some of these costs. Toyota sold 2.3 million vehicles, 2.3 million vehicles in the US last year. Its single biggest market. Holding the line on pricing was both a bold and a customer-friendly decision. Cutting costs hard behind the scenes. Toyota has considerable U.S. manufacturing plants in Kentucky, Texas, Indiana, and they cover many of its models, but it still imports a significant number of vehicles, especially some Lexus models and the Land Cruiser, and some of the hybrids. Every imported Toyota Lexus, of course, now faces the 25% tax, so the cost burden is substantial. By cutting overhead in negotiation with suppliers, Toyota hopes to compensate enough that it doesn't have to slap that 25% price jump on the prices of those cars. So it's trying to absorb the cost, basically. It might build the next generation RAV4 in Kentucky rather than in Japan. Reuters reported that Toyota is considering producing this in the US at the Kentucky plant rather than in Japan, and Canada was also on the plan as well. The RAV4 is, of course, Toyota's one of its global best-selling cars, and shifting production would be a significant move to tariff-proof that scenario. Sales and demand dynamics, interestingly, Toyota and other Japanese car makers saw a surge in US sales at the end of March as news of the impending tariffs spread. Many buyers had rushed to purchase these vehicles before potential price increases hit. So Toyota US dealers actually reported increased customer traffic at the end of March as people tried to get under the wire and pick up these cars before the prices jumped. And this helped clear out a lot of inventory that would have been subject to tariff because they'd already shipped it over, and it did give Toyota a bit of a breathing room, as it did for other manufacturers like Honda. Honda also has a lot of production facilities in America, and they were one of the first people, a strategic move that they did early on. They announced that they would build the next generation Civic, including the Civic Hybrid, in Indiana, USA, instead of in Mexico. This decision was reported back in March, and directly in response to the tariffs. They were one of the first people to do this. The Civic, of course, is one of Honda's best-selling cars in America, and the company had originally planned to produce the upcoming new model in Mexico, but because of the 25% levy, they have reversed that decision, and it will retool its Indiana plant to handle the new Civic starting in 2028 with the output of 210,000 cars per year. This was one of the first concrete reallocation measures by a Japanese car maker in response to Trump's tariff plans, signaling how serious Honda is about avoiding import taxes. As already mentioned, like Toyota, Honda already benefits from substantial US production, so the Accord, the CR-V, Odyssey, and others, they're already built at their plant in Ohio, Alabama, and Indiana. This covers a large chunk of its lineup. Some models like Acura luxury cars and the Honda HR-V and Fit, etc. are imported from Japan and Mexico. Honda is keeping its US plants running full steam and even considering boosting output for models that can substitute for the imported ones. So for instance, the smaller HR-V, if it gets too expensive, Honda will push a slightly larger CR-V made as an alternative to the price-sensitive buyers. Well, that's interesting. Honda also likely, again, as Toyota did, they also enjoyed a late March sales uplift as customers hurried to buy their cars before the tariffs were introduced. Let's move across to Nissan. Nissan, of course, you remember, I've done another video about this. Go check it out. It's a company that's in trouble. They almost joined Honda, then that deal fell through. They're now looking for another partner, another backer. So this is a company that's already saying that they are in trouble. They could, and I think earlier this year they said they've got 12 months left or something like that. But it is, it's one of the biggest car makers in Japan. It's also going to be hit with the tariffs. Nissan is scaling back production of the Rogue SUV, which is the X-Trail. I think we know it as the X-Trail in America. They know it as the Rogue. They're cutting back production in Japan by 13,000 units over May and July. The Rogue is Nissan's best-selling model in the US. And while Nissan builds a large number in Tennessee, so they do build them there, but it also imports additional roads to make up to meet extra demand. These come from the Kyosho plant in Japan. But the 25% tariff means that they're going to be more expensive to sell. So Nissan's plan is to reduce the Japanese output by as much as 20% and instead rely more on the US factory for the supply. In fact, earlier this year they were considering cutting a shift in one of its plants, but they backtracked and they decided to keep the second shift running to build more Rogues in America. And this pivot ensured that most of the Rogues sold in America are going to be tariff-free and not being imported. Nissan's Japanese factories are feeling the pinch, however. Workers at Kyosho are on reduced hours, and some production days are being cancelled in the upcoming months due to the US order cuts. Nissan will reassess after July July based on the tariff outlook. Essentially, Nissan is turning off the tap on exporting vehicles that would face tariffs to avoid just piling up unsold inventory. Price reduction and customer incentives. Nissan took a customer-first approach amid the turmoil. It reduced prices on two of its US-built models, the Rogue and the Pathfinder, interestingly, by cutting these prices by a few hundred to a couple of $1,000s. Nissan is bolstering its appeal and highlighting that they are built in America and not subject to tariffs. So they're making that statement. Meanwhile, for the smaller models that are imported from Mexico, like the Versa, Sentra, Kicks, Nissan has warned that price increases might be coming for those models once the current inventory is run out. And then let's move on to Korea. Hyundai and Kia. They're actually doing well out of this, interestingly. Record sales and no price increases. Hyundai reported that record US sales in March 2025 as American customers flocked to dealerships, similar to what happened to Toyota and Honda, spurred on by buying cars before the new tariffs would kick in. However, the company has actually been ramping up US production, adding the Tucson SUV to output in Alabama, which just happened to coincide fortuitously with the tariffs. And to maintain buyer confidence, Hyundai pledged not to raise prices for 60 days on any current models. This price freeze until early June reassured shoppers that they could buy a new Hyundai without worrying about abrupt post-tariff price surges. It's effectively a public commitment to absorb the tariff costs, at least in the short term. Kia, Hyundai's sister company, of course, they did the same thing pretty much. Kia has not raised prices either and benefits from the same US factories. Kia's Georgia plant produces the Telluride and Sorento, for instance. Hyundai's Alabama plant and Kia's Georgia plant together build several of the company's top-selling cars, like the Santa Fe, like the Telluride. Additionally, Hyundai opened a new plant in 2022 in Montgomery to produce electric vehicles and more SUVs. All of this means a large portion of the Hyundai Kia vehicles in the US are actually tariff-free. Notably, shares of Hyundai and Kia did fall on this tariff news, losing about $16.5 billion in the market. But operationally, the firms have been well positioned. The other side of this is the public perception. Hyundai's proactive stance, openly saying we will not raise prices, and then highlighting the fact that actually they make their cars in America, which they were trying to get that message across anyway, that has contributed to the sales surge and actually earned them a lot of goodwill in the market. But every car maker is doing the maths, right? Can they wait Trump out? Can they shift production? Can they survive another 100 days of this craziness, right? The tariff credits announced recently will help, some of them, but they don't erase all of the damage. Factories have already been shut, jobs are already at risk, and there have been layoffs, and there will be layoffs, and profits have been torched. The responses above show a range of strategies: pausing shipments, adjusting prices, cutting costs, shifting production. But a common theme through all of these is that car makers are trying to buy time and flexibility in the face of uncertainty. Virtually all the companies have expressed hope that the tariff situation is temporary. Nonetheless, global car makers have demonstrated, I've got to be honest about this, a remarkable ability to pivot and adapt in the face of these 2025 tariffs. From Jaguar Land Rover's shipment freeze to Porsche's pre-tariff stockpiling, GM's withdrawn guidance, Toyota's cost-cutting. Each response highlights the balance between protecting the financial health of their company and maintaining customer goodwill. The situation remains fluid, but as one industry insider said, the tariffs may dent the auto industry, but it won't break it. Car companies are finding ways to keep the wheels turning. There's ongoing dialogue and adaptive strategies, and manufacturers worldwide are striving to navigate this trade turbulence until clearer skies prevail. So they may just try to ride out this storm. I hope so. We all hope so. As car guys, we all hope so, because, of course, we love the car industry. Anyway, I've been blabbering on long enough. Now it's up to you. You tell me what you think. What's going to happen? What is happening? How do you see this playing out? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe on your way out. And I look forward to hearing from you and catching up with you soon again in the next video. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.